Good evening, everybody. Today is September 29th. It is 5:18 p.m. We're a little bit late. I'm Brian Chalik, President of the Redevelopment Commission. I'm calling this meeting to order. We all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
PowerPoint, I think.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. Betsy Parkinson's here, Jenna Francisconi's here, EJ's here. The only one, or JT's here, the only one we're missing is Damon, correct? And I believe he's in Italy, so I don't think he wants to talk with us. I wouldn't. Public comment. Do we have any public comment? 5:19 p.m. No public comment. I will close public comment at 5:19 p.m. Minutes. August 25th, 2021, regular meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Any changes, additions, subtractions?
Nope.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Claims, claim docket. Has everybody had a chance to look at that? I believe there was an addition here. Yeah, it's an addition.
Should be at the end of your packet, yeah.
No, that's yours.
Yeah.
David, is the addition on this?
So the addition to the claims is at the end of the packet that I provided you for Baker Tilly.
Okay. Everybody had a
I need
chance
to
to look at that? I guess we pay half of this bill. Correct?
Correct. It's half, 1,815.
Any questions,
Amend.
comments?
I don't have any questions on that portion, but I was just curious on the second invoice from Jacob and Hefner, the one that was just under $5,700. It mentioned reimbursable expenses, but didn't list anything.
I can get an itemized list. Usually that's lab fees or something of that order when it's their work. So that was an actual sampling event, so it would have been, sampling equipment type stuff that's specific to the project that wouldn't be reused. But
Cool, thanks, man.
Any other items on the claims? I hate to bring this up, but Marquis Electric, it's $9,061. That's for doing the damaged pole, right? The only one, we haven't had one
Correct.
since, and moving
Yeah.
it.
Yep, that was for the damaged pole in Clear Lake Boulevard and moving that back, and that has been moved.
Back 3 feet, I believe, so we wouldn't have to do this again,
It's already been moved. Yep.
just to make sure everybody knows, is aware of that. Okay. Any other questions about the claims?
I'll make a motion to approve the 9/29/2021 claim docket.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of passing the claims docket, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Claims docket passes 4-0. Old business. Seventh amendment to the Kensington Development Agreement. As A, and we're gonna do both of them?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll do
Okay,
one
both
at
of
a
them
time.
both.
I'll do them.
And B is the Kensington Development Use and Restriction Agreement, and Mr. Hagen, our attorney, is going to explain that to us.
Thank you, Brian. First, let's start with the Seventh Amendment. This is related to the Kensington transaction and is a request to extend the inspection and approval period until Friday, October 15th, which is basically just an extension to allow the closing things that need to happen, to allow them to happen. And we're scheduled to be closed as of this Friday, so don't let the October 15th scare you, because hopefully we're done in 2 days. So this is just, at this point, pretty much a formality, but the period had technically expired last week. So it's a matter of housekeeping with respect to this amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
No.
That take care of the use and restriction?
Okay. The use and restriction easement agreement is also related to the Kensington transaction and is basically restating in a separate document the restrictions on a corner piece that is being retained by the city and restrictions on use of that piece by the city. And so it's been requested that we put what was already in the development agreement that's been approved by all the parties in a separate document that could be recorded. And so that's the purpose of this use and restriction. It basically prohibits signage and use of a very corner piece there at the corner of Pine Lake Avenue and Truesdale that the city will retain ownership of. It's a 0.2 acre piece. It restricts the city from using it for anything other than basically landscaping. And if the Kensington or its tenant choose to use it at some point in the future, they have easement rights to do so.
Questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Seventh Amendment to the Kensington Development Agreement.
I will second that.
You can do them separate. That's okay.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion in reference to the Seventh Amendment to the Kensington Development Agreement? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The Seventh Amendment passes 4-0. Kensington Development Use and Restriction Agreement. We've already discussed that. Motion?
I will make a motion to accept the use and easement, use restriction and easement agreement.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in, the Kensington Development Use and Restriction Agreement, all in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Don George Ford Property Public Offering Update. David?
Okay. So the Don George property, we're in the process of, we collected 2 bids, and as we've mentioned before, bids were not to our satisfaction, so we will be rejecting those bids. And so now we will proceed with the process of demolition, which the RDC has already approved allocation. So we have to go out and get qualifications from contractors for demolition of the property, which would happen before the end of this year.
Questions? Mayor?
Thank you. Tom Dermody, Mayor of the City of LaPorte. And before coming to vote, and David's not aware of any latest information, is it possible to bring that back at a later time of this meeting?
Yeah, table it.
We could
Just table it for now if you could. I would appreciate that.
The Don George one?
Yes. Thank you.
Consider it tabled. We have to vote on that?
No.
Don George is tabled.
Do we have to ask the judge to?
Pardon?
Yeah.
New business. Nick?
Under new business, I had a couple late additions. One is actually old business, but just wanted to make note of it. The RDC back in late 2019, 2020, approved a contract for Reith Riley Construction to construct the parking lot and trailhead just past the roundabout. We also weren't sure how much the boardwalk was going to cost at that point, so we never executed that contract. I am going to work with Brian and sometime this week finally execute that contract. So it's a very old one, so I just wanted to make sure the RDC was aware that, that was sitting there and we hadn't executed anything, but we will move forward with that. This is just informational purposes. The other item I had was just Friday, we finally got approval for our site-wide groundwater monitoring program at Newport Landing from IDEM. This is something that we've kind of been working towards for a long time. It was actually a requirement of our original site status letter that was issued in 2016. So we've kind of been working to that point. We're at that point. We have the approval from IDEM, and we actually also are hearing that contractors are having trouble getting well casing material. We have a contractor that has time in their schedule and has the material, so to not move to the back of the line, I wanted to bring it to tonight. The contract's for Jacob and Hefner, so it's a professional services contract. It's in a not to exceed amount of $177,500. Of that, we would look at $105,687.50 coming from the 2021 RDC budget. The funds are there, the dollars are there. And then we've also, pending council's final approval of the budget, we'd look at the remaining $71,812.50 to come from the 2022 budget. But I would be asking for your approval for this proposal to essentially install necessary wells and do 1 year of monitoring at the site with Jacob and Hefner. So
Which we are required to do by the IDEM, correct?
we're required to do it. It's something that we've honestly kind of been dragging our feet on because we wanted to make sure we got everything to a place where we were kind of comfortable as far as, almost all the environmental work in our Phase 1 and Phase 2A area are all wrapped up, and now we feel like it's a good time to get in there and start this monitoring, which is a kind of a after project type thing we do. So,
Questions? Any questions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for monitoring well installation, groundwater sampling, and reporting.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Questions or comments? All in favor of approving Jacob and Hefner's contract for up to 177, is that what it was? State by saying yay.
Yay.
Yay. Opposed? Hearing none, passes 4-0, Nick.
thank you.
Anything else you got?
That's what I had for this evening. Thank you. And I apologize to
Well, you
bring it
can't
up,
do much
but
when it comes Friday. I mean,
yeah,
came at a good time if you need to get it going.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. You're up, my friend. Annual TIF presentation.
Good evening. Andy Mauser with Baker Tilly. And I did pass around a few copies before the meeting started of, you should have a TIF report, kind of a bound report, and then also a presentation as well. So I know there's a few copies up there. Hopefully everyone has one. And then I did leave a few copies up here in case anyone from the public would like a copy as well. So did just want to mention this is the annual TIF presentation. Some of you may recall a few years ago, the state put in a new requirement that once a year, the Redevelopment Commission, and really any redevelopment commission in the state of Indiana, has to hold a public meeting where you go through the budget for your TIF dollars, the long-term plan for your TIF areas, and then also any impact of your TIF areas on the overlapping taxing units. So this is a presentation meant to meet that requirement, but then also we hope this is a good reference document for you as well. The presentation covers a lot of the same things that are in the report. The report just has a little bit more detail on some of those TIF calculations. It has all your outstanding debt and all the detail on all your outstanding debt and some of the history behind your TIF areas. So I'll go through the presentation. For the most part, there is one page I wanted to highlight in the report as well, but we'll just kind of go through the presentation here this evening. And you've still got your 4 TIF areas. Those operate in much the same way as they always have here in the last couple of years, just with new debt obligations, with the old hospital going off, the new hospital coming on, the new Flaherty and Collins project. It's a bit more complex than it has been, so just kind of wanted to talk through some of those changes from what you've seen in the past. And then you may recall the Redevelopment Commission did consolidate all 4 of your TIF areas into one consolidated economic development area. So I think next year, once we get past a couple of your final debt payments on some of your older bonds, we'll be able to consolidate this report a little bit more as well. So I'll start on the presentation on slide 3, kind of with your TIF 1, your central business TIF, which now also includes the hospital allocation area that was set up a couple of years ago, and then the F&C, the Flaherty and Collins allocation area as well. So just a little bit of history on page 3. Your central business TIF area was originally set up in 1990. So that was what was formerly an unlimited life TIF area. There was legislation put in place in 2015 that put a cap on those unlimited areas. And also in 2015, you had issued the 2015 B bonds, which extended that out to a maximum term of 2040. So that one will expire in 2040. It's one of your older TIF areas, but still has one of the longer lives remaining. And then the second piece of that area was your 2005 expansion, which has a 30-year life and will expire in 2035. So a little bit newer area, but an expiration here sooner in the future. And then we've included 4 years of TIF estimates and a little bit of history on your collections. Looking back to last year, pay 2020, we were estimating about $1.56 million of TIF collections for the central business TIF. Your actual collections were right at 1.52 million. So very, very strong. This is a good diverse TIF area, a lot of different taxpayers, and even through the pandemic, your collections were, very, very close to what we expected. So no real impacts from the pandemic, which was good. Here so far for pay 21, estimate right in line with last year, about 1.55 million. And so far this year with your spring distribution, you're at about 53% already for the year. So looks like you're right where you need to be, and then maybe even some of what wasn't collected last year has started to come in. Expect a little bit of growth for pay 22. Those values were just certified here by the county in the last couple months, so you can see a slight increase there. And then in pay 2023, and this is where the old hospital and new hospital come into play, with the old hospital assessment expected to drop to around $5 million, with that facility being fully vacated. You will see a drop in your central business TIF from about, just under 1.6 million to about 900,000. So, close to $680,000 decrease as the old hospital assessed value decreases there. But at the same time, as we turn to page 4, the new hospital will start to come into play, and that TIF area was set up a couple years ago in 2019, kind of in anticipation of the new hospital project. So it has its own 25-year life, and that 25-year life goes through the final maturity of the Newport Landing bonds that were issued in 2020, so it'll expire in 2045. And this this allocation area includes the new hospital itself, but then when that area was expanded to pick up the new hospital, there were a few other parcels that were included as well. So you can see there's just under $11,000 that'll be collected next year, and that's from parcels that don't include the new hospital itself. So already a little bit of growth, like I said, outside of just the new hospital. And then the new hospital will actually receive the 10-year UEA or enterprise zone deductions. And it'll actually receive 2 separate deductions that'll be kind of staggered on 10-year periods. One that will start with the partial assessment this year in 2021, and then one that'll start with the full assessment next year in 2022. So, there's a 35% fee that's charged for them receiving that 100% deduction. And then of that, the city, the Redevelopment Commission, you'll receive back an amount to pay debt service on the 2021 bonds, and then also half of what's remaining. So I'll go through this when we get to the page in the report that I want to just highlight quickly. But that fee we're expecting for that 10-year period to be about $500,000 per year. The debt service on those bonds is right around $300,000. So you'll get the $300,000, and then you'll get half of that $200,000 remaining. So about $400,000 per year that will come to the City and Redevelopment Commission as your portion of that enterprise zone fee from the new hospital. So that's based on, for next year, certified value for the new hospital is just over $41 million for the land and the building. And then they've also got $23 million of personal property equipment in the hospital as well, which with depreciation assesses right around $9.6 million. So that equipment, they receive the enterprise zone deduction on that, so it factors into the fee. But then once the enterprise zone deduction wears off, that personal property won't be captured as TIF. It'll go right back to the tax base at that time. So the land and the building will stay in the TIF area. The equipment will go back to the tax base. So kind of a two-tiered benefit there. And then on page 5 is the last piece of what was formerly the central business area, and that's the F&C area that was set up a couple years ago for Flaherty and Collins project up at Newport Landing, which looks like it's well underway at this point. So it also has a 25-year life and will expire at that same time in 2045, same as the hospital allocation area. And they do pay an amount that they've actually agreed to, a little bit unique here, where they're actually guaranteeing their TIF stream. And I apologize, I just noticed a typo actually there. That'll be $264,000 in 2023, and then in 2024, they're guaranteed to pay at least $440,000. It should be $440 instead of $400 there. But again, as we go through each year, we'll keep an eye on what they're paying, and if once we get the full assessment, if their tax bill comes in at $400,000, they'll be responsible for paying that tax bill and then also paying that extra $40,000 to get up to that level. And that's just an amount really to cover, the majority of the bond payment for the bonds that were issued for their project. So then on page 6, working with Courtney's office, working with David, we've identified different projects, kind of from your 2022 budget, different professional services, infrastructure, land acquisition, things that you have in mind for next year, and then also some goal projects for 2023 to 2025. So, as we look at a cash flow later in here, hopefully that'll be helpful for prioritizing, especially some of these longer-term projects, as you look at the funds, either from existing balances or from your future revenues to help pay for some of those. So then the next section I'll walk through is your Thomas Rose TIF area, TIF 2. Like your downtown, your central business, it does have multiple pieces, and it actually has kind of one of each TIF area. You have an unlimited life piece dating back to 1991, so that's also capped at the final maturity of your 2015 bonds in 2040. You have a 30-year life piece that was set up in 2005 that will expire in 2035. And then also a 25-year life portion that was set up in 2013 that will expire in 2038. So you'll see kind of a rolling expiration of this TIF area over about a 5-year period. And like your central business, this is a very healthy and diverse TIF area, right around 1.2 million in collections last year, which was right at our estimate. You're actually right at 53% as well here, so you're where we'd expect you to be for a half year, and maybe even seeing some of last year's come in as well. And then there is some growth that we're expecting with 2022 values certified. You can see an increase of about $70,000 from right around 1.24 million to 1.31. So that area certainly continues to grow like we've seen over the last few years. And then on the next page, again, identified some projects, included in your budget for 2022, and then also some of those longer-term projects here over the next few years. And then on pages 10 and 11, wanted to just summarize your different debt obligations that you have outstanding. All your debt that I'll go through on these 2 pages is payable from a property tax levy on the city, but then you've got the ability to utilize TIF to make those payments. The city's never had to use that property tax levy, and we don't anticipate that you ever will. That's just to provide the best security on the bonds, the lowest interest rate. So again, like I said, the TIF, as I'll show here soon, has always, and we expect always will be sufficient to cover all these bond payments. So the first obligation is your 2012 bonds. Just one payment remaining on those. They'll be fully paid off this coming February. And those were actually a refunding of some 2001 bonds and are paid just from your central business TIF. So as I go through, some of these bonds are paid from single TIF areas, some are paid from multiple TIF areas, and then a couple of the more recent ones, you really have flexibility to pay from anything. So The second obligation is your 2015 A bonds, right around $2.5 million outstanding on those through 2036. And those primarily have been paid through your Thomas Rose TIF. The third obligation, your 2015 B bonds, a little over $10 million remaining on those through 2040. And as I mentioned, those were the bonds that were issued to maximize the life of your central business and Thomas Rose TIF areas. So those extend throughout 2040. And then those were the bonds that really kind of brought your central business and Thomas Rose areas together. You have the flexibility of using either TIF area to pay those. And then here more recently, in 2020, the Newport Landing, Flaherty and Collins financing was issued, right around $8 million through 2045. And you do have flexibility to pay those bonds from your central business TIF, FNC's TIF, and then as well as the Thomas Rose TIF as well. So we expect that their TIF and their guaranteed payments will make up the majority of those payments, but you do also have the flexibility to use some of your other TIF to make up any shortfalls in those. And then last year, the 2021 bonds were issued for additional work in Newport Landing, including remediation, a sewage lift station, and some underground utility improvements. So right around $3.7 million on those, and they're payable through 2036. And these, with the consolidation of your TIF areas, with this bond issue, you have the flexibility of using really any funds. You can use Central Business TIF, Thomas Rose TIF. It actually pulled in your Eastgate and Town Square areas as well. And then you do have the flexibility to use that enterprise zone fee from LaPorte, the new hospital, to assist with those payments. So this is really kind of what pulled all four of your TIF areas together into a consolidated EDA and gives you that flexibility to spend really kind of across the whole city going forward. So the next couple areas, your Eastgate TIF on page 13. This one a little more simple, just has one piece to it. It was set up in 2004 with a 30-year life, so it'll expire in 2034. TIF collections have been very consistent there. You can see over a 3-year period, right around $340,000 per year. They did actually just miss their property tax payment deadline this past November, so that wasn't distributed in your normal December distribution, but it was paid, I think, just a few weeks late, and then was distributed this spring. So if you look at your 2021 numbers, you've actually collected $15,000 over what we'd expect you to collect for the whole year, and you haven't gotten your December distribution yet. So you're well ahead, and that's really just making up for what was not distributed this past December. And then next year, expected to stay very consistent as well. Just one debt obligation payable from this TIF, shown on page 14. And this is another one that'll be fully repaid this coming February, just one final payment on those. This is the one bond issue you have that's not backed by a city property tax, was a pure TIF obligation. And then once these are fully paid off, that'll really kind of open up the flexibility to use the Eastgate TIF, like I said, kind of within the full consolidated economic development area, because that TIF currently is pledged just to these bonds. So it's kind of one last payment that'll free up the Eastgate TIF, give you some more flexibility there. Like your other TIF areas, we've included, some of your projects outlined in your budget for 2022, and then some of your, future goal projects. And then, as I mentioned, once that final payment is made this February, really you'll have flexibility to use this area to assist with other improvements around the city as well. And then the final TIF area, TIF 4, the Town Square area, similar to Eastgate, just has one piece to it, was set up in 2006 with a 30-year life, so it'll expire in 2036. It's also been very consistent, TIF around $80,000 to $90,000 per year, and your collections have been right where they need to be, or even a little bit above this last year. So no real unusual things to mention with that area. And then on slide 18, again, identified those projects payable from, included in your budget for 2022, and then some of those future goal projects as well. And then as as you move forward, this TIF area will be able to assist with some of those projects, throughout the city as well. So really kind of getting pulled into the overall TIF picture. So page 19, I want to maybe pause there and then just quickly turn in the report to page 16. This is a page that we've really kind of focused on the last couple of years, taking a look at really your full picture, pulling together all those different TIF streams, all your other revenues, including your enterprise zone fees, and then comparing that to all your debt obligations. So you can see kind of the left 2/3 of the page shows your different TIF streams, the central business TIF. You'll notice that drop from 2022 to 2023 as the old hospital is reassessed, as it's vacated. The enterprise zone fees, well in excess of $400,000 through that 10-year period from the new hospital. The hospital TIF area, which as I mentioned is generating a small amount of TIF currently, and then once the enterprise zone fees wear off, we expect that to jump well over 1.2 million in the later years. Your Thomas Rose TIF, around $1.3 million, which will expire. You've got kind of a two or three tiered expiration there. You'll see a drop off in 2036 and then another drop off after 2039. The Flaherty and Collins project, again, those guaranteed amounts that they've agreed to, the $264,000 the first year and then $440 thereafter. Your Eastgate TIF and then your Town Square TIF. So then we've pulled that all together. You can see for 2021, just shy of $3.3 million in total TIF and enterprise zone fee collections. Should jump next year to about just short of 3.8 million. You'll see a bit of a drop the following year as the old hospital again drops in assessment, but then the TIF should hold pretty steady around 3.5 million. You'll see an increase in the later years as the new hospital TIF comes on. It'll peak around 4.3 million and then start to drop off again as some of those TIF areas start to expire. So that's just something we track, especially looking into those later years as we're planning for debt and planning for other projects, making sure we have a good idea of when your TIF areas expire, because they'll really expire, as early as 2034, but then you have areas that go, well into the 2040s as well. Mm-hmm. And then we've then compared that to, I guess, that third column from the right, your outstanding obligations. That includes all the debt that we just went through. So your 2004 bonds, your 2012 bonds, your 2015A, 2015B, 2020, and 2021 bonds. And you can see that stream kind of, for the most part mirrors your TIF stream. Payments around 1.4 million here in the next few years. When the FNC bonds come on, it'll increase to about 1.8 million, but again, that's, a lot of that jump is from that $440,000 they'll be paying each year. And then as some of those obligations are paid off, you can see a decrease to about 1.1 million around 2036 as the areas start to expire, and then another drop off in the early 2040s. So if you look at those far two columns on the right, that shows what you have left over on an annual basis for other projects, and then also your TIF coverage. So your TIF coverage is, through the whole life of all these obligations in the life of your TIF areas, well in excess of 185%, which is very healthy. You've got almost, $2 of TIF for every dollar of debt service. So that obviously gives you quite a bit of coverage, like I mentioned, to never have to levy that property tax on any of your TIF debt. And then that coverage is also money you can use for, your annual projects. So, all those other things you do on an annual basis, all those projects you've identified, that's the money available there. So then kind of shifting back to the presentation on slide 19, where this is maybe the report's a little more detailed and compares, kind of the detail on your TIF to all your bonds. We also wanted to look maybe, a little bit more on a cash flow basis and compare not only, your debt obligations, but then also, like I mentioned, those other pay-as-you-go annual type expenses as well. So between your 4 TIF areas, you've got a current balance of just shy of $1.8 million. So your balances have recovered, here pretty quickly. Through the remainder of 2021, we've included what we expect you to collect this December. Your final bond payments will be made first thing next year. and then any other future expenses. So you can see through the end of the year and actually into early next year, we expect that balance to continue to increase. And then in 2022, even with your debt service payments and then your various budgeted expenditures that we went through for the various TIF areas, about $350,000 for various professional services across the 4 areas, $1.7 million in different projects. We still expect next year, if you spend what's been budgeted so far, you should, continue to accumulate about $400,000 surplus. And so then going forward, we've, in that future projects line, tried to identify an amount you could continue to spend on an annual basis on other projects, and then maintain those balances. So you see we've shown $1.5 million in 2023, $1.2 million in 2024 and 2025, and then you'll notice across the bottom, that would maintain your TIF balance right around 2.9 million, where we expect it to be after next year. So, you certainly have the ability to continue to do those projects, and then also we'll have some balance. So if there are bigger picture projects that you'd like to, proceed with, you do have some of that balance to, certainly spend on projects as well. So your areas, I know, was a little bit tight after the remediation work and everything, but as you can see, your balances have recovered pretty quickly, and then the TIF picture going forward looks very healthy. So that's the majority of the presentation. The last thing I wanted to go through was the third requirement, which is the impact of your TIF areas. And we've included a slide here on slide number 20, kind of showing just TIF mechanics, how TIF generally is set up to work. And one thing I wanted to highlight, all your TIF areas, anytime you're looking at TIF, one advantage to TIF is it does maintain that base value within the area. So even if you have individual properties that are declining, that overall base will always be preserved. So, what you've done is you've created growth in these TIF areas by investing in different infrastructure and projects, incentives, as we've seen more recently for, more unique projects like Flaherty and Collins. And so you've started to see that growth happen. And really the goal of TIF is to use that growth to leverage those improvements, continue to see new investment, which we've seen your areas, as I highlighted here, continue to grow. And then once your areas expire, get that assessed value back to the tax base. So if you look at this graph, you have a couple TIF areas, the new hospital, Flaherty and Collins, that are more on the left side, where we haven't really seen growth yet, but we know that growth is coming because of the investments you've made. But then you do also have areas, as I mentioned, you'll start to see expirations in the mid-2030s. So you have areas that are, more over here in year 15 or so, where you've already seen that growth, you've continued to reinvest, and then here within the next, decade or decade and a half, that assessed value will get back to the overlapping tax base and then create some of those positive benefits. So just wanted to highlight again, TIF, you really have a multiple, TIF areas that are at different points in their lifespans, and you do have TIF areas where you're very close to getting that assessed value back and creating some good positive benefits on the tax base as well. And then on the last 3 slides, we've tried to highlight kind of an illustrative situation. We wanted to show what you currently capture in your TIF areas. And we've shown all 3 taxing districts that you currently capture TIF in, so LaPorte Center Township, LaPorte Kankakee 1, and LaPorte Kankakee 2. And between your 4 TIF areas, you currently capture about $3.2 million in annual TIF. We took a look at if you were to give up $10 million of assessed value in LaPorte Center Township, $5 million in LaPorte Kankakee 1, and $1 million in LaPorte Kankakee 2, what impact would that have on your TIF areas? And then what impact would that have on the overlapping taxing units? And the fact is, if you were to give up $16 million across those 3 taxing districts from some combination of your 4 TIF areas, your annual collections would drop from about $3.2 million to right around $2.7 million. So giving up that $16 million of assessed value would result in a reduction in TIF collections of about $500,000. A lot of times we hear that, with TIF, that impact would be 1 for 1. If we're giving up $500,000 of TIF, that's $500,000 that the city and the schools and all the other units would see. But actually, because those units are constrained by maximum levy, they're not able to levy more in property taxes. So the actual impact you can see kind of on the bottom of that first page, the direct impact to all those overlapping taxing units would be just short of $13,000. So that's direct benefit. You're giving up $500,000 in TIF collections to, give up, or for the other units, including the city, which would see about half of that, $13,000 in benefit. So then the question is kind of where's that other $490,000 going? Well, again, because those units are constrained by maximum levy, they would raise the same amount in property taxes, but raising it from a larger tax base, it would actually pull tax rates down slightly. So you can see that impact. Again, giving up $500,000 of TIF, that reduction on your tax rate would be just over 4 cents on a $3.47 tax rate. So really pretty minor reduction in the tax rate just because the TIF is such a small portion of the overlapping taxing unit or overlapping tax base. So I think really what it kind of highlights there is, you've continued to capture TIF, you've continued to reinvest, especially your downtown, your Thomas Rose areas have seen, quite a bit of investment, quite a bit of growth. And so continuing to build that growth and then reinvest, you've continued to see, things continue to grow as we've gone on. And then, as I mentioned earlier, once those areas do get to their expiration dates, then these taxing units will see that assessed value get back and certainly help create some of these benefits, including bringing tax rates down, circuit breaker losses, things like that. So just wanted to kind of highlight some of the potential impacts and again, kind of go through where your 4 TIF areas are at currently. So I'd stop there and then certainly available for any questions.
Have any questions? Questions? Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Good stuff to read. I'd like to note that our county assessor here, Mr. Michael Schultz, sitting in the background, is, I don't know why he's here, but he's here. Just checking us out, I guess. Okay, other business. Bert, do you have any?
I do not have any other business.
Mayor?
Thank you, and I appreciate your patience. And Mike Schultz, like many, all want to be involved in the city of LaPorte and where we're headed, so it's great
why
to
he's
have
here.
him here. But just to continue what David had begun regarding the Don George public offering, what we're doing is, obviously, we were in hopes of having more bids. You saw what happened in the process. And I think at this time, because it's such a premium spot for our community and with where we want it to be, I'm just going to ask that if the RDC, who originally supported and voted to just have the city, or I guess the RDC, knock the building down and demolish it, if we could continue down that path. Let's clear it up. The public, the residents have all asked us, hey, let's get that building down, and rightly so. So I would just ask for your approval to allow David to put out a public bid for demolition, correct?
Correct.
Is the way. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, that's where we started with it, when we started.
Correct, and I
with it.
apologize
We're right back
about
to there.
delaying that.
And I think you are correct, it needs to come down quickly.
Yes,
We have the money to demolish it, so
and you've already approved it at
we've
one
already
point.
approved it. We need a motion?
Yeah, let's read it.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to bid out the demolition of the Don George Ford property.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. David, go after it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? We're way past our time here.
I'll make a
You're up.
motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn, second.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second, no discussion. We are adjourned.